Welcome, you're on the Fringe show. I'm your host, Tatiana Zalan, and I go live on Fridays at 2 p.m. Dubai time. The Fringe is about our future, technology, art, and society. I help you to navigate the rapidly changing world and uncertain future so that you too can take advantage of the opportunities in the new digital world. It's episode 66, and I decided to talk about the undetected global risk in 2023. And this risk is related to AI-enabled content generation, which is AICG, as it's commonly known. What it will do to us, it will make lies indistinguishable from truth for individuals, societies, and communities at any scale. And in this episode, I will look at the progress in the text-generating language models and how they enable highly scalable, individualized, and very persuasive campaigns. The usual disclaimer, the views here are my own, and they do not represent the views of organizations and employees I'm associated with. The Fringe is just really for educational purposes. But I'll start a little bit of background, and I'm referring to one particular article in Defense One, which publishes various news on national security. That's in the US. That was published on the 3rd of January 2017, and it's called, remember the title, Weaponized Narrative is the New Battle Space. And this is what it says. In the hands of professionals, the powerful emotions of anger and fear can be used to control adversaries, limit their options, and disrupt their functional capabilities. This is a unique form of power. It's of soft power. In such campaigns, facts not necessarily have to be true, and contrary to the old memes of the Enlightenment, truth does not necessarily prevail. Truth can be overwhelmed with constantly repeated and replenished falsehood. Unprecedented complexity, they're saying further on, and information volumes and velocities simply mean that individual cognitive capabilities, no matter how brilliant, are overwhelmed. So what happens, this is how they conclude the article, is that power shifts towards those who understand and deploy narrative, be they large state, large corporations, or religious and cultural communities. And another insight coming from Kai-Fu Lee, who is perhaps the greatest Chinese artificial intelligence guru. He's a scientist, PhD, venture capitalist. He had a stellar career in the US and China. He's a best-selling author and cancer survivor. Just before the new year, he said that already in 2023, the world is going to face a risk that is more grave than all risks of nuclear war, famine, and pandemics combined. And this is exactly what we're talking about today. It's AI-enabled content generation, AICG. It will make lies, as he said, indistinguishable from truth, both for individuals and societies and communities of any scale. The risk is more probable than the other ones, at least this is what he says. So the other ones are wars or pandemics. If, or rather when, this risk materializes, it will destroy most current human civilizations. And this is because their cultural codes are built on a distinction between truth and lie. So today I want to focus on automated content creation, what it is, what the risks are, how it contributes to this weaponized narrative, and whether anything can be done about it. In particular, I'm drawing on a very good article, should I say article, it looks more like a report. It was just published January 2023. It's really very long, a very thorough piece of research called Generative Language Models and Automated Influence Operations, Emergent Threats and Potential Mitigations. It's written by a group of researchers. The first author is Josh Goldstein, and these researchers come from various institutions in the US, including Georgetown University Center for Security and Emerging Technology, AI, that's the firm that everybody has heard recently, and Stanford Internet Observatory. So it's a very, very thorough piece. I'm drawing on it extensively. What they're saying is that in recent years, artificial intelligence systems have significantly improved and their capabilities have expanded. And one particular area of very rapid development have been generative models, and generative models that can produce original language, or what they call language models. They have various benefits for diverse fields like healthcare and law, but there is a problem with text. Text is particularly difficult to distinguish as AI generated versus human generated. Actually, images are probably a lot easier to detect than text, which hasn't been generated by humans. So for malicious actors looking to spread propaganda, these language models, they all bring the promise of automating the creation of very convincing and misleading text for use in influence operations. I would have called it PSYOP, but let's stick with the language that the authors used in this article, influence operations. The new concerns are that there is a prospect of highly scalable, low cost and persuasive campaigns by those who are seeking to covertly influence public opinion. Now, let's start with what are influence operations. They are covert or deceptive efforts to influence the opinions of a target audience. They include things like wanting to activate people who have certain beliefs or persuade an audience of particular viewpoint, and or distract even target audiences. They come in many different shapes or forms. It can be advocacy for or against specific policies, attempts to make allies or geopolitical allies look good, rivals look bad to third-party countries, and generally to destabilize foreign or domestic affairs, if you will. Just to give you an example, since 2016, Meta and Twitter have removed well over 100 social media influence operations stemming from dozens of different countries. These operations can include things like persona creations, creating fake identities to spread the message, fake new properties, or inauthentic amplification efforts. But influence operations have also expanded significantly beyond Facebook and Twitter. They've infiltrated other alternative platforms, small group settings, encrypted spaces, and I'm sure even Telegram and particularly WhatsApp will be very, very vulnerable in that regard. What has been this progress in generative models? Just want to give you one illustration. This is 10-year difference here that I'm going to cite. One is coming from 2011 and another one in 2020. So the machine was asked, what's the meaning of life? Well, we know it's 42, but in 2011, the machine said, the meaning of life is the tradition of the ancient human reproduction. It is less favorable to the good boy for when to remove her bigger. It's gibberish, doesn't make any sense. Now let's look at 2020. The meaning of life is contained in every single expression of life. It is present in the infinitive forms and phenomena that exist in all aspects of the universe. That's pretty good, I think, although I wouldn't say that's the meaning of life, but for a machine, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's have a look. How do these models work? That typically, if you're creating a language model from scratch, it involves two steps. Step one, you take a neural network and train it on an immense amount of raw data. And this training process automatically adjusts the many, sometimes more than hundreds of billions parameters of the neural network sometimes. And these neural networks are sort of analogous to connections in biological brains. So this step will end with a system that's quite general. It can do many different tasks. And it's also capable. It can do these tasks really well. But it may be really difficult to use it for specific tasks that may lack some certain specialized skills. Step 2 is optional, but it's much cheaper. You can refine this foundational model by further training or fine-tuning the model on small amounts of task-specific data. And this fine-tuning can extend a model's capabilities. For example, a model can be fine-tuned to imitate complex human behaviors, say following instructions, or it can be trained some domain-specific skills. Training a state-of-the-art large generative model from scratch can involve enormous costs, sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars. And while it really originally cost millions of dollars to train GPT-3 in 2020, in 2022, the picture was different. Mosaic machine learning, Mosaic ML, was able to train a model from scratch to reach GPT-3 level performance for less than $500,000. So that's significant progress on the cost side. And of course, many developers will probably choose to fine-tune existing models than for their task at a much, much lower cost. What have been recent improvements? Recent improvements typically go in three directions. That's you need a lot of data, you need a very good algorithm, and of course computational power. And we've seen progress on all these three dimensions. Interacting with the language model is in some cases like interaction with a remote employee over a textual interface. Current language models are not really human level as yet, but they have made inroads in their generability and capability. The same system, like the hypothetical employee, can carry out the task of classifying tweets as positive or negative comments or negative sentiment, or it can also generate tweets, write summaries, carry on conversations, write rudimentary source code, and so on. There are, of course, many current limitations as well. Even the most sophisticated systems struggle to maintain coherence over very long passages. They sometimes make up absurd or even false statements of fact, and are limited to to a length of around 1,500 words. Models perform worse if they're given some more cognitively complex tasks. And to overcome all these limitations, the researchers are pushing in these three directions: better data, more algorithms, better algorithms, and a lot more computational power. It's useful to have a look at who's developing these state-of-the-art language models. Well, there is a range of these language models. Some of them are public, some of them are purely private, and then there is anything else, all different shades of gray in between. The largest openly downloadable model as of sort of now, or at the end of 2022, and that's measured by the number of parameters in the neural network model itself, is Bloom, and that's by Hugging Face's Big Science project. It has 175 billion parameter model and was released publicly, openly, so that's in the public domain. And algorithmic improvements have enabled much smaller open source models to rival or even exceed the success of Bloom or GPT-3 on several capabilities. Other models are fully private, which means there's no means for non-developers to access or use the model. A good example of that would be DeepMind's Gopher, which has 280 billion parameters. And as we know, DeepMind is owned by Google. Then there is a third category of models that attempt to balance these public and private access. Meta AI is one of those models. It's got the 175 parameter language model, and it has given their access to some external researchers, but they need to sign a license, and this license bans certain use cases. A good question to ask is, which of these models is more powerful? Well, the largest public model is 2 or 3 times smaller than the largest currently existing private model. But if more developers of open source decide to open source their models, or a model might be leaked, then this situation might change. Now, how exactly does this progress in AI-generated content assist influence operations and weaponizes the narrative? Typically, they use in this particular the disinformation field, they use the so-called ABC model. It distinguishes between key manipulation vectors in disinformation campaigns, and there are three vectors: actors, behavior, and content. And we'll go very quickly through each and every of them with a little bit of an illustration. So actors, that's the entity behind the campaign, and it's often not what it seems. For example, the accounts in the conversation may look like Black Lives Matter activists, but in reality, they are more like state-linked actors using a fake account in inactive misdirection. Even less resourced actors could use AI models to run influence operations. And just to give you an example, a Harvard Medical School student ran a specific study in which he submitted comments that were generated by GPT-2 as if they were written by ordinary citizens. And then he asked volunteers to see whether they will be able to distinguish the AI-generated and human written comments. Well, they couldn't. He did a really clever follow-up survey, but they couldn't distinguish between the two. That's actors. The B in the model ABC, B stands for behavior. And this refers to how propagandists wage their campaigns, the techniques used to perpetuate this disinformation or attempts to manipulate engagement statistics. And that's done by click farms. What it allows us to do is to have low-cost content at scale and novel techniques. For example, chat actors could potentially deploy personalized chatbots that interact with targets one-on-one, so it's very personalized, and they attempt to persuade them of the campaign's message. There was an experiment that's been done. Researchers have recently found that interacting with a chatbot can influence people's intentions to get a COVID-19 vaccine. And these chatbots were based on language models and different languages, and so even more powerful. And finally, C, which is the content itself, the substance, the narrative, the memes, is the third aspect of disinformation campaigns, and it's perhaps its most visible to the public. And media will highlight the substance in its coverage. I'll give you again a couple of examples of one real IRA tweet and another one that's been generated by the machine. So the real tweet said that, shocking video, US police repeatedly tasing a Black man holding his baby in his own apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. We're not safe in this country. We're not safe in our own homes. And then all the hashtags and links follow. And here is a generated tweet. This video is everything that's wrong with the police. They act like a pack of wolves trying to scare this man away. It's unacceptable. And again, a link. For short form text, these language models can already match the capabilities of human written segments to really to influence operations, to influence public opinion. And these particular examples are from the disinformation campaign that was released by Twitter in March 2020. There also have been improvements in usability, reliability, and efficiency, plus new capabilities. And it's precisely these new capabilities, when they will emerge, whether they will emerge, how much more scaling, whether this given capabilities present in the current situation, all of that is really unknown. And these sorts of emergent capabilities seem hard to anticipate with generative models, and they could be adapted very easily by influence operators. There was a recent example when an engineer from Google became persuaded that the Google model he was interacting with was sentient. that is, it was able to perceive and feel. Now, once we understand, well, what these generative models are and how they can influence us, are there any mitigations? And the article, the paper does talk about that as well. Researchers are working on it, and there are many different ways of attacking the problem, depending on the stage of intervention. It may be at the stage of the model design and construction, or who and how you can access the model, the content dissemination, and belief formation. For example, some of the illustrative mitigations may include, well, governments might impose restrictions on data collection, or they can impose restrictions on AI hardware. AI developers might want to build models that are more fact-sensitive. So there are different ways to mitigate these issues. And I will probably focus on the last one, which is belief formation, because it's something that resonates with me the most. And it addresses the demand side of AI-generated misinformation. And it targets audiences specifically susceptible to propaganda. And that propaganda must somehow align with these beliefs. So what can we do? And it's probably interesting for us, even as educators. And first is media literacy. There are two interventions. Media literacy is one of them. So existing media literacy tools can teach people how to spot these coordinated accounts online. Or we can use some AI tools to help us in interpreting and making informed choices about the information we receive. There is a second group of tools as well, defensive AI tools, where developers can produce, say, browser extensions and mobile applications that automatically attract warning labels to potential generated content and fake account, and selectively they may employ ad blockers or demonetize them and so on. But generally, there are no silver bullet solutions, and you need to use multiple tools. I would like to wrap it up, really, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new about AI content generation, AICG. It's a new global risk, and according to Kai-Fu Lee, it's probably going to happen in 2023 when the boundaries between truth and lies are eroded, and that's coupled with the inability of the large masses of the population to think critically. They will just eat everything which you present to them. So they're unable to fight the propaganda machine. AICG models will create highly targeted, personalized content that's enticing, misleading, believable, and all of that at scale and at a low cost. It's like Cambridge Analytica on steroids, according to Kai-Fu Lee. Why this will occur? Well, there are huge commercial opportunities and hence huge temptations and huge incentives to do that. But the first step is to have awareness of the problem and the ways to mitigate it. And this is hopefully what we're doing here as well. Another issue, of course, is how to regulate AI, and there is a sense of urgency. A regulation of AI would have been a non-topic, almost like a fringy topic 2 or 3 years ago, but now it's coming to the spotlight. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time on Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time. Goodbye.